Hello, fellow horror fans. Welcome back to day 2 of Horror Month 2018. So, let's continue our look at the Halloween franchise with Halloween 2. On October 31st, 1978, Michael Myers is shot and falls off a balcony. Taking shelter to recover from his injuries, Michael steals a kitchen knife from the home of an elderly couple and kills a teenage girl living next door. Laurie Strode, who narrowly survived being killed by Michael earlier in the night, is taken to Haddonfield Memorial Hospital, while psychiatrist Dr. Sam Loomis continues his pursuit of Michael. While with Sheriff Lee Brackett, Loomis spots and chases after teenager Ben Tramer, who he mistakes for Michael as an oncoming police car suddenly crashes into Ben and a van which explodes, killing him in the process. Sheriff Brackett receives the news of the death of his daughter Annie. Blaming Loomis for her death, Sheriff Brackett goes home to tell his wife about it, leaving Deputy Gary Hunt in charge to help Loomis. At the hospital, paramedic Jimmy develops romantic feelings for Laurie, much to the chagrin of head nurse Virginia Alvis. Michael discovers Laurie's location via the radio, due to the news of the murders reaching the media, and makes his way to the hospital. Once there, he cuts the phone lines and disables the cars. Oh, that is so not good. Security guard Mr. Garrett goes downstairs to fix the power in the basement, and is killed with a hammer clawed to his skull. Paramedic Bud Scarlotti strangled, while Nurse Karen is scalded to death in the hospital's hydrotherapy tub. Meanwhile, Janet hurries out to find Dr. Mixter, only to find him dead with a needle jammed into his eye. Before she could flee, Michael kills her with a syringe. Jimmy and Nurse Jill Franco search the hospital for Laurie, who is trying to evade Michael. Jimmy finds Alvis's corpse and slips in a pool of blood on the floor, losing consciousness. Oh, yay. Elsewhere, Loomis is informed that Michael broke into the local elementary school. As he investigates, Loomis's colleague, Marion Chambers, and U.S. Marshal Terrence Gummel come to escort Loomis back to Smith's Grove on the governor's orders. Along the way, Marion tells Loomis that Laurie is Michael's sister, but that information was kept secret for her safety. Oh my gosh, plot twist! With the realization that Michael's after Laurie, Loomis orders Gummel to drive back to Haddonfield. Just after finding Laurie, Jill is killed by a scalpel-wielding Michael, who then pursues Laurie through the hospital. Laurie escapes to the parking lot and hides in Jimmy's car. Regaining consciousness, Jimmy exits the hospital and gets in the car to seek help, but falls unconscious on the steering wheel horn because of his injuries, alerting Michael to their location. Wow, Jimmy, you are just so bad at this, aren't you? Loomis, Marion, and Gummel reach the hospital just in time to save Laurie. Loomis shoots Michael 5 more times. As Marion attempts to contact the police, Michael kills Gummel and chases Loomis and Laurie into an operating room. Michael stabs Loomis in the stomach, wounding him, but Laurie shoots Michael in his eyes, blinding him. Ha-ha! Loomis and Laurie fill the room with ether and oxygen gas. Loomis orders Laurie to run and sacrifices himself by igniting the gas, which blows up the operating room with him and Michael inside, immolating them both in the fire. Oh boy. Michael, engulfed in flames, stumbles out of the room before finally falling dead. Early the next morning, Laurie is put in an ambulance and driven to safety, having visions of Michael's body burning in her mind. Oh, jeez. Well, that's a nice conclusion to the friend. Oh, wait a minute. We still have a few more movies left to go. My bad. So anyway, let's look at the production of this movie. Carpenter and Hill, the writers of the first Halloween, had originally considered setting the sequel a few years after the events of Halloween. They planned to have Myers track Laurie Strode to her new home in a high-rise apartment building. However, the setting was later changed to Haddonfield Hospital in script meetings. Halloween executive producers Irwin Yablans and Mustafa Akkad invested heavily in the sequel, boasting a much larger budget than its predecessor, $2.5 million, compared to only $320,000 for the original, even though Carpenter refused to direct. Most of the film was shot at Morningside Hospital in Los Angeles, California, and Pasadena Community Hospital in Pasadena, California. There was discussion of filming Halloween 2 in 3D. Hill said, quote, He investigated a number of 3D processes, but they were far too expensive for this particular project. Also, most of the projects we do involve a lot of night shooting. Evil works at night. It's hard to do that in 3D. The sequel was intended to conclude the story of Michael Myers and Laurie Strode. The third film, Halloween 3: Season of the Witch, released a year later, contained a plot that deviated wholly from that of the first two films. Tommy Lee Wallace, the director of Halloween 3, stated, quote, "It is our intention to create an anthology of the series, sort of along the lines of Night Gallery or The Twilight Zone, only on a much larger scale, of course." When asked in a 1982 interview what happened to Myers and Loomis, Carpenter flatly answered, quote, "The Shape is dead. Plus his character is dead too, unfortunately. This will later be retconned with both Michael and Loomis. This will later be retconned, and both Michael and Loomis will return for multiple later installments." The screenplay of Halloween 2 was written by Carpenter and Hill. In a 1981 interview with Fangoria magazine, Hill mentions the finished film differs somewhat from the initial drafts of the screenplay. The plot twist of Laurie B. Michael's sister required a retcon of the timeline between Judith's murder and the events depicted in the first Halloween, while Michael Myers is said to have committed the crime 15 years ago and to be 21. Okay. Film critic Roger Ebert, who praised the first film, notes that the plot of the sequel was rather simple. Quote, "The plot of Halloween 2 absolutely depends, of course, on our old friend, the idiot plot, which requires that everyone in the movie behaves at all times like an idiot. That's necessary because if anyone were to use common sense, the problem would be solved and the movie would be over." Characters were described as shallow and like cardboard. Hill rebuffed such critiques by arguing that, quote, "In a thriller film, what a character says is often irrelevant, especially in those sequences where the objective is to build up suspense." Historian Nicholas Rogers suggests that a portion of the film seems to have drawn inspiration from the, quote, "contemporary controversy surrounding the holiday itself." He points specifically to the scene of the film when a young boy in a pirate costume arrives at Haddonfield Memorial Hospital with a razor blade lodged in his mouth, a reference to the urban legend of tainted Halloween candy. According to Rogers, quote, "The Halloween films opened to the wake of the billowing stories about Halloween sadism and clearly traded on the uncertainties surrounding trick-or-treating and the general safety of the festival." The main cast of Halloween reprised their roles in the sequel with the exception of Nick Castle, who had played adult Michael Myers in the original. Veteran English actor Pleasance continued the role of Dr. Sam Loomis, who had been Myers' psychiatrist for the past 15 years while Myers was institutionalized at Smith's Grove Sanitarium. Curtis, then 22, again played the teenage babysitter Laurie Strode, the younger sister of Myers. Curtis required a wig for the role of long-haired Laurie Strode, as she had her own hair cut shorter. Charles Cyphers reprised the role of Sheriff Lee Brackett, though his character disappears from the film when the corpse of his daughter Annie is discovered. Nancy Loomis appears as Annie in a cameo role as her father, Sheriff Brackett, closes her eyes as her corpse is being taken out of the house in a stretcher. Actor Hunter Von Leer heads the manhunt for Michaels in the role of Deputy Gary Hunt. He admitted in an interview that he had never watched Halloween before being cast in the part. He stated, quote, "I did not see the original first, but being from a small town, I wanted the deputy to have compassion." Nancy Stevens, who played Loomis's nurse colleague Mary Chambers in the original, also reprised the character and was given a more important role, revealing to Loomis the family connection between Laurie and Michael. Stunt performer Dick Warlock played Myers, as in Halloween, listed as The Shape in the credits, replacing Castle, who was beginning a career as a director. Warlock's previous film experience in film was as a stunt double in films such as The Green Berets and Jaws, and the 1974 television series Kolchak the Night Stalker. In an interview, Warlock explained how he prepared for the role since Myers received far more screen time in the sequel than the original. Warlock said, quote, "I watched the scenes where Laurie is huddled in the closet. Michael breaks through. She grabs the hanger and thrusts it up into his eyes. Michael falls down and Laurie walks to the bedroom doorway and sits down. In the background, we see Michael sit up and turn towards her to the beat of the music. Anyway, that and the hell tilt were the things I carried with me at Halloween 2. I didn't really see that much more to hang my hat on in the first film." Warlock also claims that the mask he wore was the same one Nick Castle used in the first film. Hill confirmed this in an interview. The supporting cast consisted of relatively unknown actors and actresses, except for Jeffrey Kramer and Ford Rainey. Most of the cast previously or later appeared in films or television series by Universal Studios, the distributor of this film. Kramer was previously cast in a supporting role as Deputy Jeff Hendricks in Jaws and Jaws 2. On Halloween 2, Kramer played Dr. Graham, a dentist who examines the charred remains of a boy confused with Myers. Rainey was chosen to play Haddonfield Memorial Hospital's drunk resident doctor, Frederick Mixter. A host of character actors were cast as hospital staff. Many were acquaintances of director Rosenthal. He told an interviewer, quote, "I've been studying acting with Milton Katselas at the Beverly Hills Playhouse, and I brought many people from the Playhouse into Halloween 2. These included Pamela Susan Shoop, Leo Rossi, and Alicia and Gloria Gifford. Rossi played the part of Bud Scarlotti, a hypersexual EMS driver who mocks Jimmy as a, quote, college boy. Shoop played Nurse Karen Bailey, who was scalded to death by Myers in the hospital therapy tub. Featured in the only nude scene in the film, Shoop discussed filming in an interview, quote, "Now that was hard. The water was freezing cold, and poor Leo Rossi and I could barely keep our teeth from chattering. The water was also pretty dirty, and I ended up with an ear infection. Ugh." Gifford and Alicia played minor supporting roles as head nurse Mrs. Virginia Alves and orderly Janet Marshall. Actor Lance Guest played an EMS driver, Jimmy. The Last Starfighter director Nick Castle stated in an interview, quote, "When I was assigned to the film, Lance Guest was the first name I wrote down on my list for Alex after seeing him in Halloween 2. Castle adds, quote, "He possessed all the qualities I wanted the character to express on screen. Kind of an innocence, shyness, yet determination." Future Saturday Night Live and Wayne's World star Dana Carvey also appears briefly in a non-speaking role, wearing a blue baseball cap by receiving instructions from the TV reporter. Awesome. Carpenter refused to direct the sequel and originally approached Tommy Lee Wallace, the art director from the original Halloween, to take the helm. Carpenter told one interviewer, quote, I made that film once and I really didn't want to do it again." After Wallace declined, Carpenter chose Rosenthal, a relatively unknown and inexperienced director whose previous credits included episodes of the television series Secrets of Midland Heights. In an interview with Twilight Zone magazine, Carpenter explains that Rosenthal was chosen because, quote, he did a terrific short called Toyer. It was full of suspense and tension and terrific performances. Stylistically, Rosenthal attempted to recreate the elements and themes of the original film. The opening title features a jack-o'-lantern that splits in half to reveal a human skull. In the original, the camera zoomed in on the jack-o'-lantern's left eye. The first scene of the film is presented through a first-person camera format in which a voyeuristic Michael Myers enters an elderly couple's home and steals a knife from the kitchen. Rosenthal attempts to reproduce the jump scenes present in the original Halloween, but does not film Myers on the periphery, which is where he appeared in many of the scenes of the original. Under Rosenthal's direction, Myers is the central feature of a majority of the scenes. In an interview with Luke Ford, Rosenthal explains, quote, "The first movie I ever did, Halloween 2, was a sequel, but it was supposed to be a direct continuation. It started 1 minute after the first movie ended. You have to try hard to maintain the style of the first movie. I wanted to feel like a two-parter. You have the responsibility and the restraints of the style that's been set. It was the same crew. My philosophy was to do more of a thriller than a slasher movie." The decision to include more gore and nudity in the sequel was not made by Rosenthal, who contends that it was Carpenter who chose to make the film much more bloodier than the original. According to the film's website, quote, "Carpenter came in and directed a few sequences to clean up some of Rosenthal's work." One reviewer of the film notes that, quote, "Carpenter, concerned that the picture will be deemed too tame by the slasher audience, refilmed several death scenes with more gore." When asked about his role in the directing process, Carpenter told an interviewer, quote, "That's a long, long story. That was a project I got involved in as a result of several different kinds of pressure. I had no influence over the direction of the film. I had an influence in the post-production. I saw a rough cut of Halloween 2, and it wasn't scary. It was about as scary as Quincy. So we had to do some post-production work to bring it at least up to par with the competition." Rosenthal was not pleased with Carpenter's changes. He reportedly complained that Carpenter, quote, ruined my carefully paced film. Regardless, many of the graphic scenes contain elements not seen before in the film. Roger Ebert claims, quote, "This movie has the first close-up I can remember of a hypodermic needle being inserted into an eyeball." The film is often categorized as a spatter film rather than a slasher film due to the elevated level of gore. Film critic John McCarthy writes of splatter films, quote, "They aim not to scare their audiences, necessarily, nor to drive them to the edge of their seats in suspense, but to mortify them with scenes of explicit gore. In splatter movies, mutilation is the message." Rosenthal later directed the 8th film of the Halloween series, Halloween Resurrection, which, ironically, contained graphically violent content. Carpenter composed and performed the score with Alan Howarth, who had previously been involved in Star Trek The Motion Picture, and worked with Carpenter on several projects, including Escape from New York, Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, Christine, and Prince of Darkness. The film score was a variation of Carpenter compositions from Halloween, particularly the main theme's familiar piano melody played in a compound 5/4 time rhythm. The score was performed on a synthesizer organ rather than a piano. One reviewer for the BBC described the revised score as having, quote, "a more gothic feel." The reviewer asserted that it, quote, "doesn't sound quite as good as the original piece, but, quote, it still remains a classical piece of music." The film featured the song Mr. Sandman, performed by the Chordettes, which will later be featured in the opening scenes of Halloween H2O, 20 years later. Okay, let me go back here. Okay. The film featured the song Mr. Sandman by the Chordettes, which would later be featured in the opening scenes of Halloween H2O, 20 years later. There we go. Viewers commented on the decision to include the song in the film, calling the selection, quote, "interesting," and, quote, "not a song you would associate with a film like this." The song worked well to, quote, "mimic Laurie's situation, sleeping a lot, making the once innocent-sounding lyrics seem threatening in a horror film." Another critic saw this inclusion of the song as, quote, "inappropriate," and asked, quote, "what was that about?" Yeah, I definitely would say that's the case. Now, let's look at something that happened sometime after this movie came out, and I'm, of course, talking about the Halloween 2 murders. An incident with minor connections to the film heightened attitudes about the potent effects of media violence on young people. On December 7, 1982, Richard Demo Boyer of El Monte, California, murdered Francis and Eileen Harbitz, an elderly couple in Fullerton, California, leading to the trial People v. Boyer. The couple were stabbed 43 times by Boyer. According to the trial transcript, Boyer's defense was that he suffered from hallucinations in the Harbitz residence brought on by, quote, "the movie Halloween 2, whose defendant had seen under the influence of PCP, marijuana, and alcohol." Ew. The film was played for the jury, and a psychopharmacologist, quote, "pointed out various similarities between its scenes and the visions defendants described." Boyer was found guilty and sentenced to death. The incident became known as the Halloween 2 murders and was featured in a short segment on TNT's Monster Vision, hosted by film critic Joe Bob Briggs. Following the trial, moral critics came to the defense of horror films and rejected calls to ban them. Thomas M. Sipos, for instance, stated, quote, "It would be silly, after all, to ban horror films just because Boyer claims to have thought that he was reenacting Halloween 2, or to ban Cars because Texas housewife Clara Harris intentionally ran down and killed her husband. Nor does it make sense to ban otherwise useful items such as drugs or guns just because some individuals misuse them." Yep, that's kind of a good point you got there, man. So overall, this is a really good follow-up to the original Halloween, and it's just a really darn good sequel. So overall, I give Halloween 2 5 jack-o'-lanterns out of 5. Well, join me tomorrow as we take a look at Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. So, until then, peace out, everybody.